Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us to our May Coordinated Entry Committee meeting. Awesome. We'll go ahead and jump right into the agenda here. Catherine, would you please call the roll?
I will. And Devin is out, but we do have Teresa joining us as his proxy. Noah Febe.
Here.
Eddy.
Here.
Martha.
Here.
Portia. Dr. Sam. Elliot.
Here.
Kelsey.
Here.
Sherry. Finn.
Here.
Mustafa.
Present.
You have 8 members present and 3 absent. You have met quorum.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. We will go ahead and get started. I'll start by grounding us in our theory of change. If we create a homelessness response system that centers the voices of people with lived experience of homelessness, then we can focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities to end homelessness. The context for our meeting today is outlined in the King County Continuum of Care Charter. Coordinated Entry Committee will oversee policies and procedures related to coordinated entry in King County. The CEC will be responsible for identifying and approving policies and procedures that guide the coordinated entry system in King County. KCRHA staff will be responsible for implementation of those policies. Great, so welcome everyone. My name is Tom Regan. I use he, him pronouns. I am the coordinated entry manager. I'm joined by Catherine Todd, our COC coordinator. So thank you all for being here today. We have a good agenda, so we can go ahead and dive right into it. The first thing on our agenda, is there anyone who would please motion, or are there any motions to approve last month's meeting minutes?
We didn't have.
We didn't have a meeting
right.
last month.
So there's no minutes to approve.
Perfect. I love when that happens. Okay.
I don't believe that there's anyone in attendees that would like to give public comment.
But do we need to approve whatever the last meeting was?
Do we need to approve, since we didn't meet in
yes.
April, do we need to vote to approve March's?
February's meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who was the second?
I heard Martha's voice, I think, on the second.
And we can do a voice vote. All in favor, say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any discussion? Okay. February meeting minutes have been approved.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Eddy.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say too, I'm just glad that I'm now in the habit of always remembering to start before, even if we didn't have something, I'm like, okay, I'm remembering that we just gotta do that every time. Great. We do have one person in attendees. I will just say, nobody reached out to us with any public comment before, but anyone who's attending the meeting, feel free to raise your hand if you do have anything to share in public comment. You'll have 2 minutes to do so. Okay, hearing no requests for public comment, I think we're okay to move on. Which means that we are keeping well ahead of schedule. The first thing that we have on our agenda today is a presentation from Febe, Fekadu, and Tara Moss from REACH and PDA. They have a presentation for us called Protecting People and Defeating Harmful Narratives in the Lead Up to FIFA. So Febe and Tara, I'll turn it over to you. Catherine, would you be able to actually make one of Phoebe or Tara co-hosts, so that maybe, would one of you like to share your screen? Or if you'd like, I can share my screen to show the slides. Feel free to come off mute and let me know what you'd want to do.
Can you do the slides and we'll tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on it,
They have panels.
Thank you.
of course.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning. Should we introduce ourselves first, Phoebe, before we jump into the slides? I know you know everybody, but everyone may
I-
not know me.
I don't know everyone, but I think that's a good idea. I could start.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for having us here. I'm Phoebe Fekadu, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Housing for Evergreen Treatment Services REACH. Pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Tara Moss. I'm a co-executive director at PDA. I oversee the lead and co-lead program. I use she, her pronouns. A little bit more about me. I've been working with the unhoused community for about 20 years now, before PDA, which I've been here for 9 years. I was at Real Change for 8 years. And then I was at an organization that I like to speak to life for those who have been around a long time, which was Street Outreach Services. And I worked there for about 4 or 5 years as well. So thanks for having us to have this important conversation. Are we ready for the slide deck?
Yeah, we are. Thank you both for joining us. Just a little, like, I guess, logistical thing. I have it as a PDF, and so
Yeah,
even though it'll be full screen, you'll kind of see the like outlines of Adobe. Is that acceptable to you both, or?
totally acceptable.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Let's see. All right.
and we can just go to, I think that's slide 2,
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Of
since we introduced ourselves. Thanks for co-piloting with us at
course.
short
Of
notice.
course.
Okay. So I guess I can start chatting while you pull up that slide, which is, you know, everyone is talking about the fact that FIFA is coming. And we're here to do a proposal of what we can do about that in terms of our communities that can be a positive impact in our communities for those who are unhoused and for everyone who's going to be around and utilizing Seattle and downtown area. As I've said, I've been doing work in Seattle for over 20 years at this point, and definitely a majority has been in the Pioneer Square area, and I know how that impacts all of our community members. So we're going to kind of talk about what we are going to be asking you all to consider today. So as I said, during the period of June and July, there's going to be a lot of extreme pressure on our neighborhoods, especially not just Pioneer Square, but, you know, it expands out, CID, the Stadium District, the Waterfront, Belltown. There's going to be tons of tourists around. There's going to be a lot of heightened security and enforcement due to the World Cup, and a lot of our folks are just going to be really impacted during this time. And how they're impacted is really kind of what we want to talk about today and what we can do around that. So next slide. And on top of how it's going to be impacted, how are we, as usual, how is Seattle going to be in the spotlight, and what are they going to say about how we respond to such demands for all of our communities? And there's going to be a lot of lessons learned, and hopefully we can show that you can be responsive to the community needs and empathetic, and ideally meeting those needs for those, especially who are unhoused, in a way that benefits them, not just in the short term, but ideally in the long term. So as we know, we could show positive lessons. And as we know, the mayor is talking about and pushing policy to expand shelter, to bring people inside, to stabilize them, to do best match to needs, and provide comprehensive care and support. So these are some of the positive lessons that we could push out to not just Seattle, but the nation and the world about this is what you do when you're having an increased demand, increased pressure, and impact for those who are unhoused in the larger community. And the next slide is or we could be showing negative lessons if we don't plan this out well around what we've seen elsewhere. And we've also seen here before in terms of individuals potentially getting swept and or were housed short-term to no overall benefit to our communities. Again, those who are unhoused and those who are housed. So if you go to the next slide, Phoebe can take over what we're proposing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So what Tara was alluding to, what we want to do is to reduce as much harm to our unhoused community that calls the Pioneer Square area their home. We know that there's going to be so many new tourists, people out, and it's just not going to be in the best interest of our community to be out there and not have all of the support that they need. And the way that this project will work is we'll have our outreach teams, whether it's from REACH, DSC, COLEAD, UCT. We will go out at different times of the day, whether it's 4 a.m., later in the evening, and to really identify who are the people that are sleeping in Pioneer Square. Our individual organizations will create our own rosters, and we will come together and create and cross-reference our rosters and create an official by name list. And then those folks will be the people that we have identified that we know are folks that live in the Pioneer Square area. We will assess them and identify which shelters would be a good match for them based off of the services and supports that they need. We already have some partner organizations through DSC, CCS, and COLEAD at the Olympic Hills location who've already agreed to partner with this project. And, we've done projects like this in the past, REACH and COLEAD through the Right of Way project, as you all have heard of, or Just Cares, where we've been able to demonstrate how we do this work and successful outcomes of that as well. Next slide. And the reason why we're here today is what we would like to also do for the folks that are partnering with us in those shelters that are partnering with us, but the folks that are in there would have direct access to housing. We were hoping that they would get prioritized through coordinated entry for housing priorities during the time of the World Cup. That way there is a direct throughput from shelter directly into housing, and that would open up more shelter beds for folks in the area. And the reason why we would go this route is the people that are in shelter would already be what we would call more ready for housing. They should have their documentation ready, stabilized, connected to resources that would allow them to be more successful within housing. Now, if we're able to locate additional resources, shelter beds or other providers that are willing to join us in this project, we would expand outside of Pioneer Square throughout the downtown corridor to ensure that everybody, the folks that are most impacted by the World Cup would have access to additional resources and support. Next slide. And one way that we know that this project will be successful is all of the coordination and collaboration that it takes. The city of Seattle is a great partner that has agreed to work with us around this, and we can utilize the UCT team, working with other organizations that are listed here, our outreach teams, whether it's COLEAD, REACH, WDC, the host team throughout that would also be participating, willing to engage, and the KCRHA would also be part of this coordination and collaboration as well to ensure that there is full transparency and that every organization is working along the parameters and boundaries and that we've all agreed to do for this project. Now, I just want to emphasize that our ask for you all today, this project would only be up until the end of FIFA. So this would be about 2 months. And for us to be able to demonstrate the effects of this project and also ensure that there's reduced harm to this population during this time. Last slide. Yeah, we want to be able to answer any questions that you all may have. We're open to discuss this as well. So this would be the time for you all to ask your questions or let us know where we can provide clarity as well. We would love to do so.
Yeah, Phoebe and Tara, thank you so much the presentation, for the information. I was going to say now maybe we can break into a little bit of like a formal discussion period. We have some time to discuss this. What I have been asked as kind of like the facilitator of this space today is to ask this group to vote on this proposal, and maybe, you know, to kind of get like very like granular about exactly like what we would be voting on. Phoebe and Tara, let me know if I'm kind of summarizing this appropriately. In my understanding, the vote would be to approve during June and July that people on this kind of like Pioneer Square Stadium District, CID, BNL, who are being referred to some of these higher acuity shelters like the Star Center and Olympic Hills be prioritized in the single adult case conferencing coordinated entry space during that time period. So it will be a time limited program, if you will, during the months of June and July. Is that a fair summary or an accurate summary of what you'd be asking the committee to vote on today?
Pretty close. The ask is that the folks at those shelters would
Okay.
have a direct, would be prioritized through coordinated entry, and the folks that are on the BNL for the Pioneer Square or expanding throughout downtown would be the ones accessing the shelters.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
essentially what we're trying to do is empty up the shelters so that we can
Yep.
bring folks in and stabilize them, but do it kind of in a trauma-informed way, because those who are in the shelters are more stable and ready to go in terms of housing. So we're not trying to exit anyone, we're trying to keep people stable and be responsive at the same time.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, thank you both. So, committee members, is there anyone who has any questions or comments for Phoebe and Tara? Feel free to raise your hands and we'll call on you.
And feel free to take down the slide deck as
I was
well.
just going to ask that as well, so I could see everyone.
I know, I
Okay.
want to see people's faces.
Sure, of course. I didn't know if maybe we wanted to keep it up just in case people wanted to like go back to a slide for reference or something, but no problem. Why group this morning? I have a little comment if that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, from a coordinated entry perspective, I think that this plan makes sense to me. And I think too, this is a general comment, not necessarily Tara and Phoebe on your presentation and this idea, but just something about kind of like how our community has kind of engaged with coordinated entry and engaged with like these types of initiatives really over the last like 5 years or so, where I think and I feel a desire to say this with this group because like this is the coordinated entry committee that, you know, is setting the policy and procedure for our coordinated entry operations. And I think that like what I feel aligned with members of this committee on in moving toward is rather than prioritizing folks for permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and transitional housing based off of what the kind of crisis or like major event or kind of like geographical pain point area is of the year or of the time, really moving us toward a place where we are addressing exactly the same type of need that you all are highlighting, but really in more of a systematic way where we are facilitating a system that regardless of geographic location is prioritizing high needs individuals for permanent supportive housing all the time, right? And so for me, I think that like this makes sense for given the moment and kind of given the yeah, the moment and like the time, if you will. And I think the important thing for me is that it is like a bracketed, time limited thing with an eye longer term on, you know, like there are members of this committee here who are working to bring like a new assessment to coordinated entry so that we're able to prioritize and kind of like better align high needs individuals with permanent supportive housing and align individuals who are more appropriate for rapid rehousing and transitional housing as we operate those programs in our community as well. So that's kind of just my only comment. And I thank you for preparing the presentation and for talking about it with the group today, because I do think that it is a very important moment for us to have this type of conversation and ensure that we who are kind of, you know, serving to facilitate the system are making sure that we're using the authority and the influence that we can and that we have to make sure that we're doing this in a trauma-informed way that isn't just kind of having our community be an afterthought. So thank you. Yeah, Phoebe.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just, one more thing I would like to clarify. I think it would be May and June and part halfway through July. That way we can get folks uh, assessed and placed into shelter, and folks can start transitioning into housing that are currently in those shelters to make space. Since the FIFA starts in June, that would give
Right.
us a month in advance to start this project.
Okay.
So it's about 2.5 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your comments, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate this committee. I know the national, I always get the acronyms wrong, NAEH, National Alliance Ending Homelessness, just sent out a report around coordinated entry and national and like the racism along with all those things. And we were talking internally about how a lot of, including leadership in this committee, has already addressed or is addressing some of the issues around what is being found nationally. So I can't tell you how much I respect what you all are doing here, how hard it is. I know that a lot of people make a lot of demands. I do like this opportunity of us being as thoughtful as possible all the way through and trying to utilize all our systems collectively and not in isolation. So I appreciate all the work that you all are doing here, and even how you're considering our proposal today, because I think it's super important. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kara.
Kelsey?
Thanks all. I think overall is it all makes a lot of sense to do this, especially given what is coming and what we know the impacts may be. Really, my question is around the like BNL management and development and just where that will live, and how is that going to be like integrated with, you know, HMIS and coordinated entry, and mostly around like the data security and BNL development.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Kelsey. So when I say we have, the city, RHA was represented, all the organizations that were mentioned today met on Friday and agreed that we would utilize this system named Gelada, in which Tara would be able to speak to much better than I can. But the way that we've agreed is that all these outreach organizations, so REACH, DSC, CoLead, I believe Chief Seattle Club has just agreed to join us as well. We'll create our own rosters of the people that we've identified that we know are living in that area. And then we would come together, cross-reference those rosters, and create a by name list. And that would be the official by name list. And that would be in collaboration and in agreement with everyone. Now, how does HMIS play into this? Could be something we discuss with you all and others at the RHA. But we do have an internal process of being able to track from the BNL where they're going to be placed, how long they're going to be placed there, and the amount of people that access housing through this project as well. I think there's a way to incorporate HMIS, but that has not been discussed thoroughly on for this project, but there is a tracking mechanism and an agreement from all the partnering agencies, city officials, and RHA as well.
Thank you. I think just for system understanding, whatever we can get integrated within HMIS would be really beneficial. So would encourage kind of looking at how that can be a part of this as we move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to look for Tom, but I don't see his face anymore. But we can create a
Hello.
program registration, and I'm sure that all partnering agencies wouldn't have a problem with registering people under that program, whatever it looks like.
Yeah, that's a great consideration. The other thing I was gonna say too is kind of like for those of you here in this group who are housing providers, and we work on you with like lease up things. This tune will sound familiar, but then of course, Phoebe and Tara, as like all the folks, and it's I know already that all the proposed like agencies and programs that are involved in this effort all have coordinated entry assessors on their staff, people who would be able to enroll all the prospective folks into the coordinated entry program, get them their requisite like housing and crisis assessments, so that we can also track all of this through our like coordinated entry performance data as well. So that's the only other kind of consideration that I would say allowed with that, but I feel confident that those details are being discussed at a high level too, so.
Yeah. And yeah, to what you were saying earlier to Tom, and I want to highlight that for the group, is we are very aware of all the hard work and you all have done around creating a new assessment that thoroughly assesses someone's needs, and having a better where folks in shelter are being prioritized for housing, and then having a direct throughput. And that is something that we're really hoping to demonstrate here, that is a better process, and that people that are in shelter are able to access housing, and then folks in the street are able to find a shelter and get inside and get connected to services that way. And so this is not to derail that work, but it's to uplift it and highlight the effectiveness of it as well. And so we're hoping that through this project that we can ensure that that happens in the near future as well.
Okay, does anyone else have any last questions or comments for Tara and Phoebe before we kind of wrap up here? No, okay. The one thing as we move toward getting ready to vote, the one thing that I would just ask anyone who might consider making a motion is if you could explicitly state for the record that this is a time limited piece, just so that when we go back to reference the notes on like what was agreed upon and voted for the record, that is like explicitly stated. I'd really appreciate that. And it doesn't have to be, I think Phoebe and Tara, I think like as long as we're agreeing that there is going to be some sort of like bracketing around the duration of the prioritization, I'm very comfortable with that. And I think that we'll leave it to some of our leaders and folks who have been kind of involved in some planning and coordination to maybe cross the T's and dot the I's on exactly what the dates are. But that would just be my request to the committee when we move to a vote. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion?
I move that we adopt this temporary adjustment coordinated entry system for single adults at a time limited manner, based on the proposal from Tara and Phoebe.
And I will second that.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I wrote it down, Catherine, so I'll be able
Thank
to.
you. Yeah, no, you're good, thank you. All right, Noah? Yes or no? The motion at hand.
And what Catherine's asking is we're now gonna move to a roll call vote. So Catherine will call on the coordinated entry committee members to vote yay, nay, or abstain.
Noah,
Yay.
Eddie,
Yay.
Martha. Yay. Portia or Dr. Sam have not shown.
No, they haven't joined.
Okay. Elliot,
Yay.
Kelsey,
Yay.
Finn,
Abstain?
Mustafa,
Yes.
we have 6 yays, 1 abstention, motion passes.
Did we call Teresa? Or can Teresa
Teresa's
can't vote?
proxy,
Okay,
right.
sorry. Is that a pass?
Yes, 6 yays, 1 abstention.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Tara and Phoebe, and congratulations. The motion passes. So we'll get this down for the record. We'll follow up with some KCRHA leadership today to discuss next steps and be in touch with your organizations and the other organizations involved in the planning. So yeah, so thank you so much for your presentation and your time with us today. We really appreciate you.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you so much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone.
Yes.
Have a good day.
You too. Yeah, thanks, everybody. Glad that we are able to do that together and work in collaboration to ensure that, you know, as we move into this, into the World Cup, you know, the FIFA kind of moment, that we're doing what we were saying, what we can to ensure that, our folks in this community is being prioritized and not kind of just an afterthought, you know, in the midst of such a kind of spectacle. So this is great. Thank you, everybody. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. We have a choice. We can either roll right on through to the next agenda item, which I have a presentation for you all about our 2025 system performance data, or we can just take like a quick, like 3-minute break if folks want to get some coffee, go to the bathroom really quick, or get a glass of water. Does anyone have any strong feelings either way?
That's gonna be great.
What was that, Mustafa?
That's gonna be great.
Oh, a quick little break?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
How about it's 10:36 right now. We'll be back here and I'll start my presentation right at 10:40. That was actually technically the agenda time
Perfect.
too, so
Yes. Thank you.
awesome. Okay, thanks, everybody. Okay. Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Give you another second to all file in. And then we'll go ahead and get started for the next piece of our agenda today. Bear with me for a sec because I'm gonna need to use multiple windows in this presentation. So instead of sharing just a window, I'm about to share my screen and I think the whole Zoom thing's gonna pop up for a sec. So I'll just have to minimize a couple windows, but then we'll start. Oh, actually, it wasn't as messy as I thought. Cool. Okay. This is great. I'm really excited to talk with you today all about, I'm seeing, Finn, I'm seeing your message. Yes, it would, because I think, how many people do we have here? Do we have 8 or 7?
8.
8?
So if in, that would be okay, we would still. have
Okay.
7.
Never mind, Finn, if you have to bounce. But then if Finn leaves, that means that nobody else can leave.
Sorry, everyone.
It's okay. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk with you all today about our 2025 system performance data. So quick agenda of what I'm going to talk with you all about today. I'll do a little introduction and an overview of kind of like where we've been, where we're going, what I'm talking about today. I will talk with you all about like what projects are participating in coordinated entry. We'll talk about access. We'll talk about the coordinated entry timeline. And then we'll get into some data about referral denials, and then referral enrollments. And then I will share my screen so we can look at a couple of our different data dashboards to talk about CE demographic data. Then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. Okay, so a little introduction. Last year I presented 2024 system performance data to you all in July of 2025. So if you remember, that was the presentation last July. Went through all the different coordinated entry system performance data from the whole 2024 year. Our policies and procedures call for quarterly monitoring reports to you all from me about our system performance data. This has been tricky. We haven't had our research and data department has not been resourced in a way to deliver us like products where I'm able to kind of bring you that those quarterly monitoring updates in a consistent way over the last couple of years. But some really exciting developments is that we've received some more resources to support our research and data department here at KCRHA. And so they've been really wonderful and excellent partners for us, really supportive. I can't say enough wonderful things about that team and how hard they work. And I know that I personally know like very well that team cares deeply about our coordinated entry system. They know how important it is to be delivering this data for us. And it's a really high priority for them. So I want to pass along, from them that they were really motivated and glad that they were able to get some of these products for us to be able to have these necessary conversations. So not only do I have 2025 system performance data to show to you today, but I also have an exciting announcement that the other piece that they were able to work with our team on is also a product that will make it possible for me to give you all quarterly data updates, which is a really huge milestone for like our team and for this committee. So something that I'll be going forward, be able to update you all on. The other thing too, and more details on this, in the coming months. But they're also beginning to kind of do an actual like fulsome evaluation, that will kind of, that I'll be able to, or, you all will be able to read and see, and we'll be able to really sink into some of those data and talk about how do we want to, what type of policy and procedure goals do we want to set, and what type of policy agenda do we want to set for improving our coordinated entry system. So really exciting stuff going on right now. So here's a table that talks about the projects that participate in coordinated entry. The first row is the different project types. So you see there are emergency shelters, transitional housing projects, rapid rehousing projects, permanent supportive housing projects. Those stand in distinction to, or permanent housing projects with services stand in distinction to permanent supportive housing projects. When we're talking about permanent housing with services, these are typically programs that don't require a disability for entry. They do require homelessness, but they don't require a disability. And oftentimes don't have those like housing case management supports. They might not even have kind of like monitored entry at the front door 24 hours, maybe only at nighttime or only during the day. So those projects are a little bit different. There are 2 safe haven projects in our community, and then there's 1 permanent housing with no services project type in our community. And when I say in our community, I mean in the coordinated entry system. So of course, there are more of these other types of projects that exist in our community, but these are the number and the types that participate in our coordinated entry system here in Seattle and King County. Something that I'd like to highlight for you all is, first of all, actually kind of dovetailing off that conversation that we were just having with Febe and Tara. And Febe mentioned, although one thing that I'd say, I wouldn't necessarily say that it has been kind of like a stated goal of like the coordinated entry teams or this coordinated entry committee, like officially, that we are like seeking to design our system to prioritize shelter. I think Febe used those words. I'm not saying that that's not a goal, but I'm also, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's true or correct to say that this group or our team has kind of ever indicated that is a goal of ours. So it's kind of like a neither nor kind of thing. And part of that is, I just would like to highlight that there are only 2 emergency shelter projects that participate in coordinated entry. And when I say participate in that sense, I mean take referrals through the coordinated entry system. So even in like a type of like throughput system that Febe and Tara were just referencing there, we wouldn't have much space or beds, frankly, to be able to refer people. Even if we were, and when we do, see folks who are enrolled in coordinated entry that are unsheltered, as you can see here, there are only 58 shelter beds that participate in coordinated entry right now. So there's obviously like a very low stock of beds that we would have at our disposal as a system together to be able to say, hey, here are some folks that have enrolled in coordinated entry and are in need of shelter. There's very little beds actually in our coordinated entry system to be able to refer unsheltered folks to. So that's kind of like one thing that stands out to me when I'm going through these numbers. The other thing that stands out to me is that we have a lot of permanent supportive housing projects, 98 permanent supportive housing projects, and about 5,034 units of housing in those permanent supportive housing projects, which I think is a pretty unique thing, nationally. Like we do have a good, stock and supply of permanent supportive housing in our community. So that's just a couple of things that I'd highlight for this group as we look at these numbers here. 165 total projects that participate in coordinated entry, and about 7,126 resource slots, beds, apartments, right? So obviously for rapid rehousing, those are really more like slots in those programs. Transitional housing, emergency shelter, we think of those more kind of as quote unquote beds. And then really with the permanent supportive housing, the permanent housing with services, and the permanent housing, those are true, units, those are apartments. Here are some numbers about access to coordinated entry. So this last year in 2025, there were about 6,800 or so, 6,763 people who were enrolled in the coordinated entry system program, whether those were at regional access points or our different community access points across the county. Of those 6,763, 4,332 were represented in our case conferencing process. So these are people who were connected with service providers who were able to work with them in our Teams and Smartsheet and like daily office hours case conferencing process that interfaced with that system. Of those 4,332, 1,822 were referred to a housing resource. And of those 1,822 who were referred, 1,170 enrolled in those programs. I think I said this to you all last year during July too. The 1,170 figure, you can also take that as a figure that says that means that there were 1,170 rapid rehousing slots or permanent supportive housing or permanent housing apartments that were available during 2025. So we sent a referral and someone enrolled in every single resource that was open through coordinated entry. So you could effectively say that there were 1,170 units that became available from January 1st to December 31st of 2025. I highlighted those numbers in contrast a little bit to the 2024 year. I thought it was interesting to compare year over year. So a similar number of the people who were seeking resources through coordinated entry, a slight little drop from 6,933 to 6,763. One thing that I found interesting was that there were more households, about 500 more represented in case conferencing. So that is a good thing. And then there were a little bit less, although not, not a huge drop, but a slight drop in the number of units that were available in 2025 from 2024. Here's some information about the timeline through coordinated entry. All these figures are expressed in median. And the other thing too is that this timeline, an important thing to note about this is that this is the timeline for people who got a referral, and were actually able to move in. So that is a pretty big disclaimer is that these numbers, these median figures for the median number of days from someone kind of initially enrolling in coordinated entry and being assessed to when they are when their care team begins to work with them in the case conferencing process and nominate them to the available resources. We're only talking about the people who actually are represented and then also ended up moving into somewhere. So that is something important to kind of name and claim about these data. However, you'll see there is less time, about a week less of time, that people went from being assessed to when they started kind of being case conferenced. Our team, performed and was able to operate with the same level of speed where once we began to close the nomination windows and tie break and send referrals, we still did that within a day and sent those referrals. And then the average time, or excuse me, the median time that it took from when someone was referred to a resource to when they actually moved in went up a little bit last year. It was 49 days rather than 39 from the year before. Here's some of our data about denials, so referral denials. In 2025, there were 2,187 total referrals. Of those 2,187 referrals, 55% were denied. So 1,203 of those referrals were denied. And then excuse me, I'm sorry. 1,203 were accepted, 55 were accepted. So that means that they successfully enrolled in the program. And then 984 or 45% of those referrals were denied. It's a very slight improvement over the year before. I think with a sample size that large, you could probably, I'm not a data scientist, but my lay eye test would say that it feels a little statistically insignificant to me, that 1% decrease. It's feels about the same, but at least it's trending in a more positive direction, that less referrals were denied. There also were, just as you notice, less total referrals in general, 2,187 down from 2,525. Here's a little bit more kind of expanded out information about the denials. You see, I keep there at the top the total number. So in 2024, again, there were 1,111 total denials. Last year, there were 984. The biggest reason still, it's the same, is true from 2024 to 2025, is because when a client has been referred to a resource, the number one reason why a denial happens is because the client refuses the resource. After that, it's because the care team or the housing provider was unable to connect with the client. After that, the next reason is that folks are ineligible upon referral. The next biggest reason in 2025 that referrals were denied was a self-resolution, that the clients were housed before they had the opportunity to enroll in the resource that they were referred to through coordinated entry. And then last year, 109 folks were denied by the property managers, and 37 times where unfortunately it was a false positive, like open unit, and the referral had to be denied because there wasn't actually an available resource. To me, some of the kind of notable things that stand out here is that the number of client refusals is down, 399 to 272. That's a decent drop. That's a good thing. Also, the drop from 219 to 163 in the inability to connect with folks is good. Increase in reasons for denial for self-resolution, that's also good. You know, that happened 51 times where it turned out the person got housed before they could move in, and it happened 122. My hope with that, and I think you all might know from some anecdotal experience, that maybe there could be a sense there that happened because the referral took so long that someone kind of pursued another option instead. But also, who knows, maybe they had multiple irons in the fire. The biggest thing I'd say with this is that, and kind of all this like denial and referral data, is that I think it's really hard to establish, and I want to make sure that I'm being very clear with you all, that I am not claiming that there are any types of causal relationships in kind of what's going on here. As you all know, there's a really complex web of factors in kind of what drives some of these trends and patterns. Our team did a lot of work last year to improve training for housing navigators and coordinated entry assessors in an effort to decrease the number of these denials. And while I'm very proud of that work, and I reported to you all about that work consistently over the last year, I still think that, it's difficult to and I think it's important to claim that that we have not necessarily tested any hypotheses to determine any types of causal relationships about why some of these numbers have changed. And I just want to make sure that I'm being very clear that, you know, we're noticing these trends and patterns about denials, that, you know, the successful referrals, you know, was 55% last year. And there is a 45% number of denials. But, you know, it's difficult to say kind of like what causes that, that trend. Here's some of our numbers from 2025 about enrollments. 494 folks enrolled in permanent supportive housing, 392 in rapid rehousing, 129 in transitional housing. So you'll see from these numbers here, similar to that first slide I showed you about the project types, that those are really kind of like the bread and butter resources that are available to folks through the coordinated entry system. Again, a very small number of emergency shelter beds, a small number of safe haven beds, and a very small number of permanent housing resources with services. So, you know, durable subsidy, project-based, permanent vouchers with not as much supportive services. Still not as much of that in our system. Really, the bulk of what we're talking about is PSH, rapid rehousing, and transitional housing. Some more referrals or enrollments to rapid rehousing, excuse me, some more enrollments in rapid rehousing in 2025 than there were in 2024, but a decrease in the number of permanent supportive housing units that were available and enrollments from the year before. Again, no claim of any type of causal relationship here. There were no hypotheses tested using this data. However, I will say, like, an eye test, kind of like lay guess around that could have had to do with the major change to our HMIS system with the live inventory that was for the first full year in operation in 2024. I think that was a huge part of the reason why we saw kind of like a great number of units available through coordinated entry in 2024 was when our team, in combination with the research and data team, took a lot of effort to really kind of get super granular with housing providers of like, you need to be logging all of this data and information about who's enrolled in your programs, how many apartments you truly have available, and kind of like reconciling all of that in HMIS. And I think we saw a little bit of like an influx of the number of apartments that were available for a period of time. And my, you know, anecdotal kind of sense on this would be in 2025 that there might have been a little bit of a return to the mean, right? Where after a year of operating that live inventory system, things kind of smoothed out a little bit, and we went back down to seeing not quite as the same amount of turnover for some of those permanent supportive housing units. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'll go to some of our interactive dashboards here and talk with you all about coordinated entry demographics. See what this looks like. Okay, I think this is like big enough for you all to see. If you want me to zoom, I can try, but I'll also make sure that I read these numbers out loud for you all. So in 2025, 35% of the households active in HMIS identified as white, 3% identified as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 12% identified as multiracial, 0% identified as Middle Eastern or North African, 7% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and 31% identified as Black or African American, 3% identified as Asian or Asian American, 4% identified as AIAN, American Indian or Alaskan Native or Indigenous, and 5% either don't know or declined to share their race information. When we move from the total number of folks who are active in HMIS, and then we just bring that down to those who are enrolled in coordinated entry, 33% of the folks who are enrolled in coordinated entry in 2025 identified as white, 3% identified as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 13% as multiracial, 1% as Middle Eastern or North African, 6% as Hispanic or Latino, 33% as Black or African American, 2% as Asian or Asian American, 6% as American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 3% chose not to answer or don't know. For those represented in case conferencing and kind of nominated to housing through that case conferencing process that we operate, 38% identified as white, 3% identified as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 13% as multiracial, 1% as Middle Eastern, North African, 6% Hispanic or Latinx, 32% as Black or African American, and 2% as Asian or Asian American, 3% as American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 2% refused to answer or didn't know. Of the households who were referred to a resource, 38% were white, 3% were Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 13% were multiracial, 0% were Middle Eastern or North African, 5% were Hispanic or Latino, 31% were Black or African American, 2% were Asian or Asian American, 6% were American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 3% chose not to answer. Those who enrolled in a resource, 37% were white. I gotta move my little ticker thing here so I can see my own screen. Thank you all for bearing with me for a sec. 37% were white, 3% were Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 14% were multiracial, 0% were Middle Eastern or North African, 5% were Hispanic or Latino, 32% were Black or African American, 2% were Asian or Asian American, 6% were AIAN, and 2% didn't know or didn't answer. When we look at age, you all can see here, for the sake of time, I might take us through like a little bit more quickly through some of these groups here, but for those who enrolled in coordinated entry, 12% are under the age of 25, 23% are 25 to 34, 28% are 35 to 44, 18% 45 to 54, 13% 55 to 64, and 6% are 65 and above. So for folks who are enrolling in coordinated entry, we see that kind of like the critical mass of our population is 25 to 54 years old. And then we have 12% are that youth and young adult population under the age of 25. And we have 6% are seniors, 65 or above. Enrolling into resources, 23% are under 25, 21% in that 25 to 34 range, 26% in that 35 to 44 range, 15% in that 45 to 54 range, 13 55 to 64, and 3% 65 or above. So I think, looking at age and race, ethnicity demographics, it's similar to what I reported to you all last year, where we're seeing decent parity between those who are active in HMIS being represented both in like race and age group, enrolling in coordinated entry, and then ending up enrolling in a housing resource through coordinated entry. Eddie, I see your hand, and if it's okay, I know that people might have asked some questions in the chat too. I think I'm just gonna hold those to the end if that's okay. Okay, cool. We'll go to gender next. So of all the folks active in HMIS, 43 identify as female and 53 identify as male. 2% identify as non-cisgender, and 2% either don't know or refuse to answer. And then enrolled in coordinated entry, 44% identify as female, 52% identify as male, 3% identify as non-cis, and 1% either choose not to answer or don't know. For enrolling into a resource, 43% of the folks enrolled identify as female, 53 identify as male, and 4% identify as non-cis, with 1% either refusing to answer. So again, I think, similar to our 2024 demographical data, we see, like I said, decent parity from as we move from the folks who are represented in HMIS to those actually enrolled in the coordinated entry system, and then those who eventually successfully move into a resource through the coordinated entry system. I think one thing that I trust you all share with me is that maybe something we could continue to focus our efforts on is ensuring that rather than simply just maintaining that parity, how are we working to design a system that prioritizes and uplifts those that we know are disproportionately represented in the homeless community, to ensure that there's a way that that they are being also prioritized to kind of, from an equity standpoint, make sure that we're doing a good job prioritizing those folks. For some information on veteran status, about 6% of the households active in HMIS are veterans. 10% of the households that enroll in coordinated entry are veterans. And then 4% of the folks who were enrolled in a resource through coordinated entry were veterans. And something that I think is important for us to look at, and I know you all would agree too, is chronic homeless status. 47% of the households active in the HMIS system are chronically homeless. 39% of the folks who enroll in coordinated entry are chronically homeless, and 57% of the households that were enrolled into a resource through coordinated entry are chronically homeless. So I think that's an important thing for us to look at and highlight, that, again, think about those numbers we looked at, where the largest resource that we have available for our community through coordinated entry is permanent supportive housing. The vast majority of the units of supportive housing, permanent supportive housing, require chronic homelessness and a disability for entry. And so we're seeing here that the population that's being served by our coordinated entry system is the chronically homeless population. I will pause there and go to the chat. I know that you all must have some questions. One question that I have for you all, I know Febe and Tara were like, for their Q&A, they were like, hey, can you take the slides down? For this presentation, do you all think that it would be helpful for me to leave them up though, just in case you have some questions and I can like go back to the slides to reference? Someone just wants to give me like a quick thumbs up. Okay, great. Let's go to questions.
So thank you for this. My question wasn't so much about the data or what you just kind of showed me. It was more, I remember, I think the last time that you did this with us, we had talked about if that dashboard was going to be able to be public facing, or something that we would be able to access on our own, because I know right now it's on your guys' internal Tableau system. Has there been any work towards that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eddy. That's the goal, is to make sure that it's something that we are sharing publicly, and is kind of like available on our coordinated entry website. Right now, just being honest and fully transparent with you all, I don't necessarily have a timeline on like when that will happen. But that certainly is the goal, is that this kind of like is that this dashboard is something that we're able to post publicly for your all's reference and the community's reference to be able to see these system performance numbers. Yes. Thank you. Catherine, I might ask you to show me what the question is in the chat. Yes, Josh, the deck will be shared. It will be posted with the meeting minutes and the recording of this meeting as a PDF on our KCRHA like COC subcommittee website. These slides will be available there. Yes. Quiet group today. Certainly it can't be because these numbers mean that we have created and accomplished the most efficient and effective coordinated entry system in the history of Seattle and King County. But yeah, is there anyone that kind of has any comments or takeaways? Was there anything that surprised anyone or stood out to anyone?
I mean, I guess just kind of throwing it out there, because when you were talking about shelters that are available in coordinated entry, I mean, that number is going to reduce fairly soon, because there's the in shelters beds will not be getting filled through coordinated entry pretty soon. So
Yeah,
unfortunately, that will reduce that number by 30. The safe haven beds will
something-
still be there, but not the shelter beds.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for saying that, Eddie. And I think that's something really important for this group to think about and for us to kind of like maybe have some conversations about how we want to target our advocacy moving forward, you know, to talk about that.
We have, I believe.
Yeah, Kelsey just pointed out that we've lost quorum. Thankfully, we don't have any more votes or anything to vote on for today, so. I don't know if that means that we must immediately just stop the meeting. I would feel a little bit. No, I don't think so,
No,
because
we
Sherry
have
joined us.
Seven.
We have seven, and also I noticed at some point Sherry joined us during the meeting too, so I think we're still okay. But anyways, yeah, I mean, Eddie, I'll say, for me, to you all, you know, as like my board in a way is like, that's a huge thing for me, you know, is people kind of ask about that all the time. They ask our team, you know, hey, I know someone who's done their assessment at a regional access point, they're living unsheltered. Obviously, it's gonna be some time, you know, best case scenario, right? Let's go to this timeline slide. Best case scenario for people who do get connected to resources through coordinated entry is that it's gonna be median, you know, 11, 19 days over the last 2 years before their case is kind of like raised in case conferencing to be considered for the housing resources that we have available. And then 40 to 50 days from when they are prioritized for a resource to when they move in. It would be marvelous if we had some more shelter beds that participated in this system that were available for folks to be referred to, so that they didn't need to be sleeping in their cars, sleeping on the streets or in places not meant for human habitation while they wait to move into their housing, right? And again, that's a sunny and optimistic outlook of timeline, median timeline, because again, these are for the folks who like did end up moving in somewhere. As we all know, these numbers become far larger for folks who kind of don't get connected to a resource, right? And so, you know, a huge part of, I think, what we want to talk about as a committee and what we want to talk about as a group is how do we work with some of our stakeholding partners to say there are people who are, you know, going to be prioritized for housing through coordinated entry who are living unsheltered, and we want this system to be something where that's the idea of the system, is that it's a unified, it's coordinated access to homeless and housing resources for people. Yeah. Okay. Well, if that's really all the questions or comments that folks have for today, that's totally cool. And we can go ahead and wrap up. That was the last thing that I had on our agenda for today. So thanks everybody for your time. And for next steps, our next meeting is May 28th. I think, honestly, I've lost track of kind of like what the Zoom invite or like what the Teams, like the calendar invite says now, if it's like 10 to noon or 10 to 11:30. I'm putting on our agendas that this meeting is meant to be scheduled from 10 in the morning till 11:30 in the morning. So that's what I have on our agenda for next month, is that it will be starting at 10 and going till 11:30.
That's what the invite says too, so.
Okay, great, perfect. So yeah, so thank you all, and if anyone has a motion for us to adjourn, we're done with our agenda and would be able to adjourn for the day.
So move.
Anyone to second?
Seconded.
Great. Okay, thanks, everybody. I hope you all
Bye,
have a great
everybody.
day.